So,
call is now being recorded.
Crossroads of Conversation is a forum initiated by RB College of Architecture to involve alumni across the globe with the current college scenarios and to be part of various discussions and exchange of ideas. The past few years have been very challenging, and the emergence of collaborative practices seems to be the way forward. The need of the hour is to diversify and combine strategies from a spectrum of other disciplines related to the field of architecture. Given the current situation of the global pandemic COVID 19, we at RVCA see the need to engage with a larger worldview that has an influence on the field of architecture. As a step in this direction, we have proposed to organize webinars for the ongoing semesters exploring the relevance of other disciplines on architectural design titled Crossroads of Conversations 2022. The webinars will enable the exchange of ideas and work experience from other allied fields between domain experts and alumni of RVCA who are currently spread across the globe. The underlying theme this year for the series of talks is building community and heritage. The intent being to provide glimpses of contemporary heritage practices in Indian cities through three lenses: locations and approaches to exploring intersections of built heritage and local communities. From politics of development at the urban scale to various forms of art and design, an explorative journey of how and where other disciplines intersect and connect with architecture and architects. Each event will be for a duration of 2 hours and in the form of presentations by three speakers, one a guest speaker and two RBC alumni, followed by interactions with the audience. Each speaker will have a 15-minute time slot to present. Our speakers for today's event are Dr. Kiran Shinde, architect Pankaj Modi, and architect Pranavi Pagadala, with the RVCA's faculty architect Nishant moderating. Looking forward to having an engaging and insightful discussion. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Anoushka Dewan. I'm also from 7th semester. And it's my pleasure to introduce the first speaker of the evening, Dr. Kiran Shinde. Dr. Kiran Shinde combines research training of an academic and professional practice of a planner with vast experience in different planning sectors across India and Australia. Currently, he heads the planning program at La Trobe University in Australia. He has researched extensively over the last 20 years on topics related to religious and cultural heritage and tourism, urban planning, destination management, etc., and authored as well as edited 3 books and more than 50 research articles in high-ranking international journals. In 2018, he was commissioned by UNWTO, the World Tourism Organization, to lead a project on Buddhist tourism in Asia towards sustainable development that covered Buddhist heritage and tourism in 16 countries. He has developed keynote addresses at conferences in Australia, USA, Canada, Singapore, Turkey, India, etc. For his extensive work, he is known as a global leader in research on religion and cultural tourism. Dr. Shinde is also the founder of Pune Binal, a festival that celebrates art, design, and architecture in public spaces in Pune that has implemented a wide range of urban placemaking projects. In 2017, he received UN Habitat's coveted Asian Townscape Award for the project Adaptive Reuse of Historic Bund Garden Bridge into Arts Plaza, Pune, India. This project also received IIID's National Award in the category for Design of Masses. As a professional planner, he has engaged with several planning projects, including the preparation of the Master Plan of Pune City in India in 2000, slum rehabilitation project for 2,500 families in flood-affected areas around Pune from 1997 to 98, preparation of annual environmental status reports (ESR) under the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act for 6 municipal councils in Maharashtra from 97 to 98. He is trained under Pritzker Award winner B.V. Doshi and renowned architect A.P. Kanvende. His academic qualifications include a PhD from Monash University, Australia, Masters in Science in Urban Management from Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand, Masters in Urban Planning from CEPT University, India, and Bachelor of Architecture from Pune University, India. At all levels of tertiary education, he has been awarded gold medals for outstanding performances. Thank you for joining us, sir. You may begin with your presentation.
That was a very long introduction. You could have simply said, I'm Salila's friend here. That should suffice. But anyway, it's always a good thing to talk to students and interact with them at different level. I'm not going to talk about all that you've covered today. I'm going to talk about very few things because you've given me only 15 minutes. So that's one part. I'll also try and talk more to the discipline that you all are from, architecture. So I'll try to make it simpler to understand some of these complexities that we've worked with. Uh, if I can share a window, let me know when you can see. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes, Kiran, it's coming up. Yeah, now we
Yes.
can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because unlike Zoom, here I can't see others in the Google Meet. So that's fine. Okay. I'll quickly start. So I've kind of made it a very general way of presenting what constitutes different elements of heritage. This is not going to be a talk on conservation. This is not going to be a talk on architecture practice. As your brief said, it's a culmination of several disciplines coming together. And how do we create better places for people using heritage as an element? Now, typically, we understand cultural heritage, as college-going kids, you would understand this as cultural fairs, traditional days, a lot of events that constitutes cultural heritage, but it also means symbols, meanings, values, belief systems, and they're constantly interacting with each other to present what we then what we now know as folk culture, vernacular arts, all of that. I'm going to focus on the visual aspect, the visual culture, because I think we, as trained architects, we are looking at places constantly with a visual lens. So I'm going to focus on that and focus on the spatial aspects of it, how that culture plays out in placemaking, right? So some of the ideas that we have experimented with over the last few years uh, are that we need to really have a contemporary vision of what cultural heritage looks like. How can we co-design? How can we co-create? How can we engage with communities? And all of this, what we have tried to do, when I say we, it's me and a team of people that we have worked with, uh, but I've led these processes. But most of this I'm going to illustrate in the public domain. So, and I'm going to use these three anchors uh, to illustrate how we understand cultural heritage, how we work with cultural heritage in public domain. So these are events, spaces, and places, and I'll go into the idea of this. So basically, events are transient in space and time. They're easy to that they can be triggers for a long-term effect, and I'll show you some of those events, but they are very purposeful, and then you could create events that can enhance and reinforce our cultural traits or cultural heritage. We have a lot more flexibility in terms of what kind of formats of events we can have, and I'm going to show you some of them. The first one that we generally get associated with is our Pune Biennale, which is what I founded in 2013. Of course, it was a long process before 2013, but it began in a very humble manner. In fact, in the staff room of my college at that point of time, where we went out and invited as many artists or people from different disciplines to come together and move this idea that we need to do something in our public spaces through art and culture. So that was a foundation. Then we took that idea to the mayor, because it's very important when you talk of cities to engage with the local representatives. Then the first Biennale looked at the cultural relationships with what is our cultural heritage. So uh, now, as urbanists, as architects, as landscape designers, urban designers, we're constantly worried about the physical image. So we said, for Pune, what's the most significant image? And most people would say, oh, we need Pune surrounded with hills. So we said, can we start looking at our hills in a different manner? So that's how we started bringing together different forms of art. So photography, filmmaking, environmental studies, performing arts. We brought all of them on the hills of Pune, and we made an appeal to people to come and actually have these art workshops, art exercises on the hill. I'm not. You can go and look at the website, but what I want to emphasize is this was an activity that was initiated by an academic institution, supported by a local government, and professional bodies came in as collaborators. So we had events like 50 artists on the hill who painted the hills, and people were watching them. We had performing art sessions on the top of the hill, a whole range of things. So this was for the first time we were looking at creating a synergy with other forms of art and drive it through architectural work, right? So with the success of 2013 Biennale, we moved to the 2015, which is second edition. Here we explicitly focused on heritage because, as I said earlier, the Biennale was created as a public space event. We wanted to emphasize the cultural value of a public space. And Pune being one of the rapidly growing cities, it's still growing, it has grown much faster, but there is constant shift in what a hardcore Punekar or a Bangalorean would call their cultural heritage. Then that may be different from someone who's just recently come to the city, maybe from Northeast or maybe from Delhi or maybe from Kolkata. So how do you really understand these new layers of heritage? So this was our theme for the second Biennale, and this was aptly displayed. The core area was Deccan College, which is a 200-year-old institution. So it kind of symbolizes, on one hand, the heritage, the educational heritage, but we also had more contemporary ideas, such as there were 50 local corporators which came to a open event in a park where we had this workshop which was called Maza Varsa Maji Drishti, which means basically my heritage. What do I see as my heritage? And these are corporators never thought that they could actually paint something. So we had one wonderful art workshop with the corporators, which people would generally say, oh, what are these politicians doing? But they painted their vision of what they thought the city was going through. So it was a great thing. We also took the heritage conversations to a shopping mall, for example, or a municipal school, and then started talking about heritage in a much wider sense. Buoyant with the kind of successes of two editions, we did the 2017 Biennale. It was called Habit Cohabit, where we actually said in our city, there are so many places that are underutilized. Can we really use art and culture to activate them? So one of them was this subway, which was closed for about close to 12 years. We opened that subway and created an art gallery into that subway, a transient one. We had a digitally simulated game on the bridge. We had a kind of almost like a wedding procession, or not a wedding procession. It was a procession called the Death of the Tree. So at the background that you see on the right-hand corner picture is actually a palm tree that is uprooted from the base of the river, thrown up into the air 30 meters high, like a sky, like a tall building. And for that death, the celebration is done by this Italian artist with a band company in Pune. So it was very interesting new cultural formations that we were looking at. We also created an artificial amphitheater inside the park. So we used the park as a setting. We used a subway as a setting. We used a school, a very non-conventional way of understanding installations and particularly cultural installations. I'll move to the next part, which is the spaces. So where we are kind of expanding the notion of this culture into a much wider vision with the community. So one of the key projects that we initiated in 2016 was Pune Speaking Walls, where we said we want our public wall surfaces to talk to us. They should reflect what our city looks like, what our city means. So we had a big celebration opening. That's the commissioner of Pune at that point of time. We worked in different places. So we were given the mandate of almost covering 50 kilometers of city, which is quite an ambitious task, but we engaged local kids. On the right-hand side, this is in an area which is heavily dominated by sex workers. So we had the kids of the sex workers coming in and showing what they think the city is for them. So we did a lot of, one of the iconic examples is, if you've been to Pune, this wall that we did. This is a 310 meters long, probably one of the longest wall mural that we have in India, one single mural. Now, what's so special about it? This is called Songs of the City. So this is where the co-creation really came in. Now, I had done some research on Pune city, particularly the 1961 floods, because that was a defining moment for the city. It disrupted the natural heritage of architecture that we had, and it started to throw up new forms of vernacular architecture. So based on that, the artist really put the floods as the centerpiece of this mural, the 310 meters long mural, and then you have the pre-flood Pune, which is more green, a more rural lifestyle kind of thing, then moving into an urban area. So there are different ways you can navigate through these cultural narratives. So with this project, we illustrated that. One of our key projects has been Chandar. Chandar means it's a rip-off of a word called Shandar, so which is grand, nice, wonderful things that you won't talk about. But this is in slums. We said one of the things that we really need to work in as urbanists is how do we really work with our slums? So we said if we can give or if we can create spaces which are beautiful, then people will maintain it. Because you look at any settlement, anybody's house, inside is absolutely spick and span and they're clean and tidy and beautiful. They take pride in doing that. But when it comes to the public domain, the streets, that's where the problem is, because they don't belong to anyone or they don't feel that they belong to it. So we said, can we really do something? So this is a slum that we started working in just opposite Ritz-Carlton Hotel in uh, Pune. Uh, we engaged extensively with the local community. We had workshops and seminars inside the slums. We came up with a whole program of what we should be doing. There's lots of people involved into it, particularly school children from the locality, the artists coming and facilitating all of that. Now, these are not pretty pictures on wall. They are people's or children's creation. So they said, oh, this is my wall here. So I'm not. So once you say that this is my wall, you're not going to spoil it. So there is a sense of belonging that comes through with that in community spaces. So from really derelict and rundown spaces, you can convert them with cultural motives. So we started to look at what are the motives that can be used, which these people see as their own motives, right? So you could easily transform. So this is a kind of a typical Marathi style, Maharashtrian style of architecture that we have here. So from a very pathetic looking kind of pan spit walls, we change that into a different kind of a sense that you're going into a traditional house. So there's a fair amount of success that we had with this. So there was a temple down here, for example, and then we created the Deep Mala as one of the elements of this presentation. And then we called in public artists. Everybody knows Jackie Shroff and the champions, and he champions the cause of slum dwellers. So when he says you do something good, people will look into it. So you need to really look at cultural heritage, cultural production in a much wider way and engage with lots of people. So that's how that project really changed from our perspective, changed or touched many lives. Point on that, we did a second project called Chandar 2 in another slum. Again, these were all done with corporate social CSR funding. Again, if you don't, we don't need too many resources. What we need is two great ideas. So we used to use projectors straight onto even tin sheds, and then we transformed some of these places into wonderful small placemaking spaces. And it's just amazing to see how that whole place changes into a wonderful space for the community, right? Now I'll come down to a much more tangible, much more concrete example for which we did also receive the award. This is the places part of it, the place activation. So this is the Bun Garden Plaza project that I'll discuss. So Bun Garden Arts Plaza is a project very close to my heart, because as a child I have been traveling on this road for umpteen number of years. So once we did the Pune Biennale, we had lots of sculptures, and then we said, what do we do with it? Just about a few years ago, the old colonial bridge that we had, this bridge was built in 1867. It was closed for traffic in 2007, and it just lied vacant. So bunch of us went to the municipal commissioner, and we said, we can really do something with this bridge, can we turn it into a pedestrian area or a sculpture park that we have got from the Biennale? We can really install some of the sculptures. The conversations went on for about 6 to 12 months. And in the process, we came up with a much bigger idea, much broader idea. And this was a very sensitively done project. So again, this it's 275 meters long. The constraint was the two constraints that we had. Prime one, the width is only 8.75 meters. Second, you couldn't go anything higher or taller than uh, the railing that is already there. So we couldn't really add any vertical elements to this. But how do we work with such a long bridge? So we created different kinds of bays. We use the symbolism. Remember, I talked about culture is all about symbolism as well. So we re-imprinted the confluence of the river below the bridge onto the top, and we decided that the central bays were more recreational, the outer bays were more public activities and all of that. And that's a whole new presentation. But from a absolutely rundown bridge, closed on bridge, we converted that into a wonderful public space, at least in our view, with using platforms as a base. And that has now turned out to be an excellent place for people to come meet, of age groups, of different age groups, and all of that. So we added a layer of culture. We reinvented or rejuvenated an old space to make it more contemporary. This is another project that we did. This is pedestrianization of under a flyover project. This is one of the kind of really busiest intersection that we have. It's a bus terminus. There is new metro station coming. But this used to be called, it is called Swargate. So there used to be a history that when people from the southern side of the city came in from different centers and districts, they used to come on horses, so called Ghudswar, Ghodeswar. So when these people came to the city, the edge of the city, they were supposed to wait there and give taxes. So that's where that gate was called Ghudswar Gate. And then Gode went off and Swar Gate. So we kind of installed that idea of the horse here. And then we created lots of sculptures that contemporary, people, when they're waiting, they're looking at uh, their mobiles and all of that. So in closing, what I would like to say is, whatever work we do, we have to ensure that that's a contribution to the community. Some or the way, we have to get community engaged into the projects that we have, because cultural heritage is so multi-layered, it's so multifaceted. Now, if we can understand where are the needs and addresses for needs for these cultural spaces, we can address them in that way. And beyond being an architect or an urbanist, we have to play multiple roles. We have to be facilitators, we have to be creators, we have to be enablers, we have to be change makers. And while I was doing all of this, a major part of this was played by my college. So for 5, 6, 7 years, all my students were actually doing hands-on projects. So all these projects, my students were involved all the time. So I think knowledge is not only power, it is an empowerment. And I'm sure most of my students are now doing extremely well in their professional life, taking some of these lessons. So that's my 15 minutes done.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Thank you. And it was wonderful to listen to all the things that are happening in Pune. I lived in Pune for a short while, long time back. Lovely to see it again. Thanks a lot. Just one question. You can take it at the very end. I would like to know how far the city government, how were you able to get the city government to work with you on all this? Because that's probably the crux of any public project. Yeah, that's about it from my side. Thank you.
Do you want me to address that now or at the end of the session?
At the end of the session, please.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving us this wonderful insight on heritage. Like ma'am said, all the audience questions for the same will be taken at the end. Now we would like to introduce our second speaker for the event, Architect Pankaj Modi. A conservation architect by practice, Architect Pankaj Modi, for more than 2 decades, has been involved in many roles in the conservation of our heritage. After graduation in architecture from RV School of Architecture, he did Masters in Conservation from the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, and specialization in wood conservation at Oslo, Norway, with an ICCROM fellowship. He is actively involved with the Bangalore chapter of India's largest NGO in the space of heritage, INTAC, the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, leading the technical team towards the successful completion of many conservation projects. Some of the significant projects done by him are the restoration of Chamaraja Memorial Hall and Government Mines School at Shimoga, restored under Smart City, restoration of Fort High School, Octorio Building, and Nimhans. He led the team at Intact to prepare the nomination dossier for getting World Heritage status for sacred ensembles of Hoyslas. The dossier has been submitted at UNESCO as an official nomination from India this year and is coming up for nomination in July 2023. He is also partner at Setu, a conservation collaborative that works on a diverse range of conservation projects from documentation to restoration to heritage assessment, and he works for Archaeological Survey of India, Neemrana, ITC, and others. The need to share history from a larger perspective results in him taking people for heritage walks in Bangalore and as a partner at Carnelian on tours of heritage sites, including many World Heritage sites in India. He strongly believes in taking the learnings from the classroom to the field and vice versa, and therefore actively involved in academics as a visiting faculty to architecture colleges in India for post-graduation course in architectural conservation. He recently spoke at TEDx platform on reinterpreting the past for the future and has published a monograph on domes and walls of South India. In 2007, his project on Brig Annex Hill at Bangalore Club was awarded the LG Arc Design Critics' Choice Award. Thank you for joining us, sir. You may now begin the session.
Thank you, Anoushka. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Anoushka. Thank you. It's always good to be on an RV platform. I'm from the first batch of RVs going back to
Pankaj, you might
1992.
have to be a little louder.
Sure. Okay.
Now it is working.
So,
Thank you.
yeah. So as I said, I'm always, it's a privilege to be on an RV platform, being from the first batch, going back to 1992 when we started architecture here. Thank you. So I'll just start my screen. And today I'm going to share with you my experiences of a restoration project which we have done. So I had a discussion with Salila what would be a good project to discuss on this platform. So this is Fort High School, and I'm going to present it from the lens of the community, of how we have worked on this project. Okay. So yeah, inclusive approach in conserving heritage. So how do we do an inclusive approach in restoration? This is one slide I wanted to start with. It's a great emotional moment for us because here is our master mason, Lakshman. And just last month, we lost him at one of our sites. He has been working with us for almost 22 years now. And we lost him. He had done some wonderful craftsmanship. So this is a Fort High School project that's there. So the whole question when we start a restoration or any heritage project is, whom are we conserving for? Whose heritage is it? Are we just like there to just restore the building and go away, or we understand for whom we are doing it, what is their requirement, how will they be using it? So it's very important to understand all these angles, and foremost, like, whose heritage. You may consider it as heritage, but do the people who are using it, occupying it, also value it as heritage? That becomes an important question for us when we start a project. So which is the community that we are addressing when we are doing a restoration project of this kind? And to be more specific to Fort High School, who is the community here? Is it the students who are studying over here? Is it the teachers? Are the craftsmen and masons who are going to be involved in the restoration project? Is it the professionals who are involved like us, who will be part of these projects, who will be restoring these works? Professionals who are in this field of conservation. Does this project have any meaning to them also? Does this restoration project also belongs to the students of architecture, engineering, history, who are from this place? The research scholars. What about the people in the neighborhood? Do they also become part of this kind of project? Do they also need to be considered when we are looking at projects of this kind? The residents, the larger residents of Bangalore, I mean, from neighborhood, let's move at a macro scale. Does this project belong to them also? Do they have some aspects which becomes part of their knowledge of Bangalore, their identity of Bangalore, so this is something that we are looking at. Then there is the owner of this building, the builders who are there, the donor who is going to give money for this project. How are we involving them? Do they also are have a say in these kind of projects? The lawmakers, from the local MLA to the councillors, okay, so are they also part of this community that we are addressing? And then the most important one, the next generation, the future, who's are we sensitizing them through these projects? Is this project an opportunity to look at how we can sensitize the next generation to valuing heritage? So these are the various levels at which we have tried to do some things in the project, because we feel that there's a responsibility in the restoration work. It's just not go repair like any civil project and come out, but then that's the whole thing. And I'll take you through a quick journey, because as we said, 15, through a quick journey of the process and how we've done this thing. So the first part is the beginning of the project, as we started the project. So 4 years back, we have actually carried out a quick, what I would say, an interaction with the students. Krupa and I have done a program called Nakshay, which is there on our website from Setu, where we were interacting with students, trying to understand what they feel is heritage. This was before even the project started. What is that they consider heritage? Is it only going to be monuments or their buildings, or what along their path when they come to school, do they identify something as heritage? And then many studies, when the project started, we looked at the precinct, we looked at the other structures all around. What is the context in which this school is placed? So this is out a lot of documentation of this building, complete detailed documentation, not only for the restoration works, but it also helped us in understanding the building, clearly revealing that the building was built in different phases. So this is a project where, as we always talk, that the building speaks to us, and the documentation here started revealing a lot of interesting details. We do archival research to look at what the old pictures tell us. This is a picture from almost 1930s, when the building was, after the building was built in 1907, and we had the earliest picture. So we tried to look at those things to understand the architecture. Documentation of the building annex. Again, a series of documentation, understanding structural systems. It's just not about measure drawing. It's about documenting the structural systems, the materials, the foundation systems. Sorry. Slides. I'm just sharing it again. So when we were doing documentation, we also got critical feedback of the quality of documentation. So we invited professionals like Vatsala, who came and gave us a critique and who helped us improvise the documentation itself of how to make a better presentation drawing of it. So it doesn't end with classrooms of 5 years, but it's just that how you're keen. So the entire team of Intact was there. Then we do condition assessment of this building before we can arrive at what interventions we need to do, and fascinating details which emerge. And this happens only if you're documenting the building in detail, because otherwise if you're just glancing around, you won't realize. So there was this very fascinating trust, and our structural consultant was very sensitive to all these, and he could recognize the importance of this. And one phase of the building had this particular truss system, which was imported and assembled in this place. So this is the Poloncio truss, which you actually see. Very interesting members. I'm not getting into the details now. And in this process, we interacted with the teachers, the principals. We had a very supporting teacher, principal over there, Mr. Chandrasekhar. and all of them here trying to tell us what the school needs, because look, we are kind of going to restore and then use it. Better we understand their requirements and how they are going to function in these spaces, what are the difficulties they are having now, from the spaces down to like basic amenities and all those things. If we can improvise those things, it would be really helpful. They came up with a challenge, for example, that classes have to run because they can't shift the students. So we had to rework on that program of how to carry out the works while the classrooms are running. So how the part phasing can be done. And then the process starts basically with another level of stakeholders, who is the funding agency. So this project actually goes back 4 years, and it was a 4 year struggle to find some donor for it. Here is Basant Poddar from Mineral Enterprises, who under his CSR grant gave money for this project. And here is Mr. Yaduvir Vadeyar, who being part of like his ancestors who have contributed to the school, was so forthcoming to come and be part of this discussion and so on, because they had donated the land. It's the reforms which the which Krishna Raja Vadeyar brought in is when the school was started here. Then the most important part is the craftsmen and the learning, because here you see how this is from an old slide, not from this project, but I always uh, take this as a great example to show some craftsmen who has learned all these things for ages, and new craftsmen who are coming, who don't have much idea but are willing to learn. So here they are drawing on the terrace the complete urn, and here he's teaching them how to rebuild it. So this exchange has to continue. So we do have this new masons keep coming, getting trained under them, and therefore this process of keeping the technology alive, technique of building alive, continues. So here are the lime plastering works, so traditional methods of doing lime plaster, the Madras terrace, and it's a continuous process of documentation. For us, the documentation doesn't start end with the start of the project, but only at the start of the project, but it's a continuous process. What kind of bricks we are finding, what is the process of taking the brick and then constructing cornices. Here we found there are jack arch roofs, so once we removed the new kind of interventions, we did the traditional waterproofing methods again, because this knowledge is still available. And there are clear benefits. It's just not the knowledge, but there are clear benefits and relevance of these things. For example, keeping it passive, the cooling, keeping the interiors cool, and so on. The Madras terrace process of reconstruction. In fact, at the end of the project, we actually carried out a test with a study with Dr. Varsha from BMS on the impact of embodied energies, restoration project versus, let's say, a new building which would have been built in this case. Than just restoring this project. So we have clear studies and figures which establishes this. Then as we were working, so the wooden craftsmen come into picture. These are the kind of wooden members which came out from the beam. Like from outside, they all appear good, but from inside, they've hollowed out. Some of these we are not able to predict at the beginning of the work, but during the course of the project, it all emerges out. So here are wooden craftsmen who are working on the new wood, traditional joinery details, and continuous engagement of the craftsmen with our team, trying to see how to document some floral patterns and how it will be rebuilt. Many of these cannot be just like taken a measurement. Here we learned through the lens of the craftsman how to document. We worked in reverse, replicate this detail. So we so this is that flow it's out of that, and all the traditional tools, like each of these tools are used for different aspects of that like one molding of this kind will have one tool, and so on. So we have a series of these tools. So this is after completion, before and then after restoration, and this is the documentation in between. As I said, documentation is an ongoing exercise. Similarly, traditional details of tools and techniques of reconstruction of cornices and moldings, templates that we use which help in this, cornice reconstructions, clearing, cleaning, just cleaning can show up a lot of detail works, and some ornamental features which are actually structural in purpose. So this detail now you see on your screen is beautiful floral detail, but it actually is holding up the projection of the first floor. So structural purpose, it's like a bracket, but such a beautiful ornamental detailing to it. Such a good synthesis of structures and aesthetics which is there. And as I said, print outreach has always been the purpose for us, one of the mandates for us. So we do a lot of these open day programs, workshops throughout the course of the project. So we have many of these open days. We had lime workshop, we had photography workshops. So this is Dr. Yogananda on a lime workshop, which was open to craftsmen, owners of heritage buildings, heritage enthusiasts and students and engineers. So they came, we had it in the building, and then we had all the line processes which could be shown here. We had Dr. Raghunath who would be present on the open days and show students, talk about the Poloncio Trust, how it works. And of course, our team, which is working, interacting with students post restoration. And these are on the open days that we have where we are taking this doing walks where our team is kind of showing them the project. We have masons interacting with all the people who are visiting, how lime plaster is done. We have the eminent people like Wadier who have come again to see like how the building is getting restored, and Basant Podar, who's continuously monitoring the project because he has funded it. He often visited the site. And as I said, sensitizing the next generation. So we have come with their parents and all, like just they just, and this is what end of the day is satisfying. This was like covered up and all these were closed. One room was a storage room, one room was a principal's room, and the central hall was like a science lab. So once we undocumented and understood the spatial organization of this place, we kind of shifted those functions to different spaces and revived these space. And today it's being used again in this school, and just using many ideas of colors and polish to enhance the features of the building. And we had a concert at the start, at the inauguration, where a lot of people across the city came and witnessed this courtyard where TM Krishna performed. And what more than having a happy look at the kids when they're back in the same space and the school. And these are some before after pictures just to close the discussion. So this is before, how the school looked. And this is after restoration. There were many interesting features which we discovered, like the whole thing of timber elements and masonry that was built. These are those brackets which I was talking about earlier, with holding on the projections on the first floor. Before, after. This is the how the building was earlier and after restoration. This again before, and we then kind of made some little interventions because we connected this block with the amenities block which we kept outside, so that it's easily accessible from inside instead of going outside the building. And also there were small interventions which were done to the building, but again the point was how sensitively can we do it. Before, after, again this again is the same building, and some parts we actually open in one of the room which connects amenities block to showcase again, when we removed the plaster, the beautiful archwork, and the rest we left it open. So for the students and everybody about these works that we worked on and involved the various in different ways during the course of the project. Thank you. I stop sharing. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Pankaj,
much.
for walking us through that school. Thank you.
Thanks, Pankaj. Ashwin, are you going to introduce the next speaker?
Yes,
Thanks.
ma'am. Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful session on heritage and sharing your documentation process. Our third speaker of the evening is architect Pravani Pagadala. Architect Pravani Pagadala holds a bachelor's degree in architecture from RVCA and is currently freelancing as a landscape architect out of passion towards sustainability and nature. A curious being and an extrovert, she loves to stay on her toes by indulging in sports, travel, and social activities. It's lovely to have you here, ma'am. Please begin with your session.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, RVCA, for this opportunity. It's a pleasure and an honor actually to speak alongside Pankaj sir and Kiran sir. I'll quickly share the screen. So today I'll be talking about a little journey, a transformation of the coin mint to a museum through a thesis, actually. So, as we all know that there are a lot of cities that are expanding and even touching different borders. People at Bangalore will definitely know how much the city has expanded. I'm from Hyderabad, and every time I return back to Hyderabad from college for holidays, I saw how much the city was actually transforming day by day. And I questioned as to what would happen to all the voids that were being formed in this process. So I started thinking about rejected structures like abandoned industries. Those were the ones that were not being used, and they actually occupied large chunks of the city. And they actually are more or less planned with a purpose of expansion. So they have a lot of potential in forming probably public spaces or green belts. And coming to my site, this place is called Mint Compound, and it's actually, I think, 2 kilometers away from home. And every time I pass the structure, I was very curious as to what would happen behind these walls. So, this monumental building sitting right in the heart of the city, my curiosity about what was behind these walls led me to the Nizam Mint that was abandoned in 1997. So the minute I started looking up about this building, Google gave me nothing except for an image. I could not find any other information elsewhere because it actually comes under the Central Finance Ministry. And then I hit a dead end because everything about this building was highly confidential. So I kept working along with Bikramjit sir, and he always motivated me that I'll find something about the site. And I found articles from 2017 that spoke about how rare currency was trapped in the mint, along with a lot of machinery. And it would be the right opportunity to reclaim our heritage. So the biggest challenge was to now approach the authorities of the Chellapalli Mint to where this mint was transferred and probably ask them if I could, document this building. So I took up this only option that I had, and I approached them with the proposal and the intention of documenting this building. And To my surprise, they actually were very encouraging and they sent to the central government for permission. As we waited for the permission, we, I mean, I actually tried to see how relevant the site and the function is, because now that we're moving towards virtual platforms like Google Pay and Phone Pay and all of that, there will be a day soon where we won't be using physical currency anymore, like coins and notes. So, what would happen to all these old currency? Um, coin collection has been a passion for so many people, and coins and currency have spoken about history, about probably who's ruling during that period, the timelines, and there are commemorative coins. So we'll be losing out on all of that once we move to these virtual platforms. So I was also trying to look at how relevant this structure would be to house a museum or probably house this large journey of currency. And looking at the historical evolution, how the Nizam actually moved his first mint from Moghalpura in Old City to Saifabad. And he actually was the first person to experiment with black notes at that point. And it's very interesting how he actually was the only one who was commissioned to even mint notes and coins at that point under the Delhi Sultanate. So after the mint got taken over by the Indian government, due to a lot of reasons, like how the melting actually would release a lot of pollutants into the atmosphere. And since this building was right in the center of the city, and since they always wanted to expand, this building was shut down and they relocated to Chellapalli. So I was trying to see what the identity of this building is at this point. And finally, what everyone thought was impossible became possible when I got the permission to document this building. And they actually did not have any document. They did not have a plan, they did not have a footprint, a map, nothing. So I had to document this whole site from scratch. And here you go. You will be able to see the condition of the site. And here I'll be showing you a few images of how it looked inside. So this is the veranda. I'll quickly run through a few images. This is the machine shop. Here comes the melting section. This is one of the larger sections on site. And I have like a video of how the section looks. So when they actually relocated to Chellapalli, they left all the old machinery behind, along with a lot of scrap, a lot of raw material. And there were a few blanks also lying around here and there. Here is the blank store. At that point, when I actually visited the site, there were a few aluminum blanks. And here's the examining section, rolling section. And this is the elevation that you can actually see on the front side of the building. The cutting section, east entrance, dissection. So this part of the site was actually handed over to the Public Works Department, and they used to manufacture dam gates. So this was also not under use. So this is the final footprint of the Mint compound, and this became the experiential canvas for my thesis. So this is the existing zoning on site. There's the main building. There's the secondary supporting blocks like cafeteria and other smaller stores for the staff. And on the hind side, there's the fabrication sheds that are now under the Public Works Department. So here with this old structure, I had to not just document, but understand what the condition of the structure is at this point, because it underwent a lot of degradation. So first thing, I tried to map out the materials. So the in the material map, the front part of this building is actually made of stone, and the rest of it is all brickwork. And I also tried to understand which were the primary load-bearing walls and which were the partition walls. And this map represents the condition, because there were a few walls which will probably not, will not be able to restore beyond a point. So those might have to be demolished. And we also, I also tried to see how the volumes were varied. So there were a few strong rooms and store rooms for each of the section. So here's an overview. This is just a model that I had made just before we hit COVID. And so there are 6 pointers that actually help me, or factors that help me make a decision with respect to the concept, the stance that I would take with this large site and the building that's sitting in 2 acres, and the concept. So history was one thing that played a major role. The associational value, because this building is a landmark. The function, the structure, along with all the conditional mapping, the materiality, and the experiential quality. So all of these led me to the concept, my design stance, and then I came up with the demolition plan. So the walls that have been highlighted were the ones that would be retained, and the rest of it would be demolished. And these are the walls that would be retained. So zooming out to the context, this is actually located just beside Hussain Sagar. If any of you have been to Hyderabad, you'd know that there are a lot of public spaces in and around Hussain Sagar, and it is a tourist spot. There's the public gardens and the Lumini Park and all of that. So having a public function in, on the site, housing a public function, seemed apt. And I also tried to see how during the procession of Ganesh Chaturthi, the whole road is blocked, and what happens to that area during that period of time. Here we can see that the activity alongside is quite busy. There are a lot of people around. There's like a person selling watermelon, there's tiffins in the morning, and there's lunch meals during afternoon. And the vehicular movement is constant. So coming to the program, there's a numismatic society in Hyderabad. Numismatics is basically the study of coins and currency. So my program actually involved a mint museum, and this would be one of a kind because a lot of museums across the globe only house coins and currency, but this would be one that would have machinery as well. And a numismatic society where there would be workshops where one could display their collection, and you could auction coins, you could buy coins, and there'll be a commemorative store as well, and a cafeteria that would run post museum hours as well. So during the program analysis, I also tried to understand how the minting process works, and also how the machinery display and the circulation would have to work alongside. This being a linear process, the spatial activity will also have to follow that order, and hence the circulation. So here's the final intervention that I had come up with. Retaining retaining the 7 walls that I had showed you. Those spaces were the most important ones in this mint, and the rest of it was I wanted to very responsibly create something that would not overpower what's existing, and respect what's existing, respect what's old, and probably represent the transition that we've come up with as well, from barter system to having coins and currency, and now we're onto virtual platforms. So I wanted to represent this transition through the intervention. And here's the circulation spine. I also tried to utilize the double height spaces of the rolling section and take people through different levels, and also work with the housing of the functions as well, because the machinery could not be moved from site. There are a few sections. This is cutting through the cafeteria, the library, numismatic society, and the rolling section. There's another one cutting through the rolling section, the display area, and the strong rooms and the vaults. Here's one cutting through the courtyard and the conference rooms and the public utility spaces. Since it is a historical building, I had to carefully deal with the structure. So there's a subtle fusion between the materials used as well. I tried to incorporate PEB structure, which would just sit on the old museum without creating any impact to the underlying structure. So the cafeteria is actually housed in the PWD shed. And these are a few references that I looked at. The first one being Sydney Living Museum's transformed mint. Initially, it was a hospital, and then they transformed it into a mint, and now it's a museum. So this was a very good example for me to understand and learn from. And there's also a church in Spain, which was initially a residence, and then they transformed it into a church. So there were many people involved in this whole journey. And initially, thanks to Bikramjit sir for pushing me through this entire process, because it was not easy. I lost hope many times, and he just helped me to keep going. Thanks to RB College, each and everyone that has helped me. Thanks to Girish sir for helping me with all the structural doubts that I had. A big thanks to the Chellapalli SPMCIL authorities for giving me permission, because nobody ever got to see the mint. So I'm extremely grateful for that. The Ministry of Finance for giving me the permission, and my family and friends for helping me through COVID, passing thesis successfully through COVID. And fortunately, this journey did not just stop at thesis. When I presented my report and my entire thesis journey to the mint authorities, it was the same time when the government had actually demolished the Secretariat, Hyderabad Secretariat, which is an old Nizam building as well. And they were coming up with an entire new structure. So the authorities felt that if not now, then even this building will end up having the same fate. So they immediately wrote to the higher authorities, and yet again, the central ministry was more than happy to go ahead with this plan of housing a museum in the Mint. And they just opened out a small passage from the east entrance that I had showed earlier, and a few sections to the public for just a week during the month of June. And it was literally like a dream come true, because I never thought that a thesis on this building would even actually come true and it would convert into a museum. I got recognized for it by the authorities and the public. And my work was also displayed as a part of the display during the museum opening. And so they'd used the maps that I'd made and the plans and all of that. So thank you.
Lovely presentation, Pravani. It was
Thank
good.
you.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you, ma'am, for the amazing session and showing us through your documentation process and your theses. Now,
Thank you.
we would like to now introduce our moderator, Faculty of RVCA, Architect Nishant. He is a conservation architect. He completed his B.Arch from SPA Delhi in 2012. He completed his M.Arch in Architectural Conservation from SPA Delhi in 2015. He is currently pursuing a PhD in Heritage Economics from NIT Calicut. You may now begin the session, sir.
Thank you. Thank you all. A really good and insightful presentation and talk from all the panel members. We have started our talk with Kiran sir, who has given us the insight about the normal notion of being heritage is something like old, and that is the common perception. And then when sir has started talking about this, breaking that idea, when you insert cultural elements in that, it's actually dynamic. It's not a static thing or always having very large scale and all. It's not necessary to with the heritage. So he has started with his idea, his works and all, and shared his ideas with Binali, having the theme of art and architecture, heritage, park, and speaking wall, and Shandar or Chandar. And then real discussion about the space and places, followed by Pankaj sir, where we saw and we discussed about material or building as a whole system, and that community engagement with that, how that individual architect or not one the conservation architect who is involved, and that is his only work with that whole system, that building system is actually involved, and the people or the community who is going to use it before and after, they are also a stakeholder, and how to engage them with the project before and after images and all, and how to make a placemaking, how to enhance its essence with the need and aspiration of the present generation. And then we have live example, like real example of adaptive reuse from Pravani, where she has gone through a struggle, like she has imagined something, stuck somewhere, and then finally there is some hope. And thank you all, thank you very much. And in between there was one question from Anuradha ma'am, and I would like to rephrase that question a little bit. And then the idea of that government support, how government or government body is does this, or do they support this kind of idea, how difficult that journey is. So Kiran sir, I would expect you to answer first, and then will be followed by Pankaj sir.
Yeah, that's a question that always gets asked. How did you get these guys on board? How can you actually get work with these? Because they don't work, right? So that's a popular perception we have. Now, a couple of ways that we have to work onto it. One is, first you have to identify a champion in the public sector. Who you can talk to, who you can share ideas, and who is in a position to actually help you. Many times there's a lot of people who talk, but they cannot help you because they have no authority. So how do you identify? And I think this is where being a planner helps me a lot, because I can understand what's at stake. So if you can map out your stakeholders very clearly, then you have to go to the government and say, and in this case, it was the local municipality or the local municipal corporation. We went to the corporation and gave them a couple of baits. Okay, the first bait was, you give me the scrap material in the city and I'll convert that into beautiful sculptures, because we've got about 4 or 5 schools of fine arts. So I said, we will get artists and art students to convert this scrap material into sculptures for you. Now that's a good deal, right? The sculpture, the waste is lying, and you would be really, you have to use your imagination to the wildest possible level, because the scrap that you get in the municipal yards is a city scrap, right? So you get buses, for example, you get garden materials, you get all sorts of things. That's an artist's delight. So we went to artists and said, we are going to give you a gold mine. Can you convert this? So that's the kind of synergy that you need to bring in. Then so that I promised them, I'll give you 20 sculptures out of that waste material that you have, right? That was a little ambitious, but we said we will do it. Now that got them eyeballed onto us, right? Then we said, if we've got these parks that not many people are using, can we actually use them a little bit better? And of course, the mayor will come and inaugurate the session, and you'll have the commissioner talking. So, all this nice public hoopla that will give you to. So even if it's your idea, give it to them. Let them take the credit for it. Because what will happen is, they are the ones who will run the project for you. Then you don't have to go from pillar to post taking permissions. You have to let that guy say, I am actually running this. I'm in control. You let that. Because whenever they realize that technically they cannot do something, they'll come back to you. Most times what happens with architecture profession is, we are very guarding ourselves all the time. This is my design. This is how I want to do it. You let go. Let go some of these things, because this is for public. If it's for public, let public decide. You only initiate the idea. So these are the two things that I have worked extensively. And once, for example, our Bund Garden Bridge, we said, yeah, this is an idea. But then the local member of parliament said, Madam said, oh, we can do this and that. And then to the press, it was like Madam's project. Okay, Madam's project, doesn't matter. She was the one who got 1 crore for me. I am not going to put my money into it. I'm only putting my brains into it. What is value of my brain? 0 for a public thing. So for an execution of a project, we have to be very realistic on what to expect from the government and what not to expect from the government. So if you do a good stakeholder mapping and then figure out who's interested in what, then it was an innovative project. For example, the Pune Biennale was innovative. So the mayor said, oh, Pune is going to do a Biennale and everything. And you ask her the spelling of Biennale, they will not know. But they will take the credit for it. Let them take. Because if you have to eventually create that event, they'll come back to us as specialists. So I think letting go and working with people are two very important things. And the third one is stakeholders. What is there for government? Once you communicate that with them very clearly, it's easier to get them on board.
Thank you, sir. Pankaj, sir, in your case, it was a public organization, like a social group, right? So how difficult it was to get that? How helpful were they, and how much control they were having on your project?
Yeah, so you can hear me, right? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Am I audible? Yeah. So basically, government, this is a government building, and we are intervening in a building which is owned by a government department. So we have the project. So, we have to understand again, like Kiran was correctly saying, who are these stakeholders? What is their role, and how much are the challenges they are facing, because going to them with a proposal and saying ke bhai restoration karna hai and you please fund the project, they will never say yes. There are many reasons for that, many challenges. It's just not corruption, but it's also about where and under what they will give the money and so on. So we had it very clear that we go to them only for permission. We say, we will arrange money, you give us permission to do the project. And they were very willing to do that. Immediately they signed the letter. I mean, we are talking of secretary level and so on. They said, okay, you can do it. And then we constantly kept sending them the progress reports. We appointed a committee who will monitor the project, because there's a client and somebody is funding us. So we had to be clear that there's no allegations on intact and this thing. So we had a committee which would evaluate the project progress, spending of the money, which included retired ASI persons, retired municipal commissioner, and so on. So this is how we got project. There are challenges like, of course, again here, minister was very glad that in his constituency, not minister, MLA, but that in his constituency such a beautiful project has happened. He came at the inauguration, made some announcement that he will develop the rest of the area, sports ground and so on. So this happens, and of course those are just announcements which remain as announcements. Nothing really happens. Very important to involve them. Right now, we are struggling for a project near on Ashoka Road, near Margaret, Margaret Road, near that football stadium, where there's an old school and we need to restore. But we have the funds organized. We have permission from the DDPI or the Education Board. But the minister has been holding on to the project. He is not interested in somebody developing that school or, so somewhere, or if we, I don't know, their interests are not aligned with the projects, it will stall the project. On the parallel, we have another project where BMRCL is one of the stakeholders, the DDPI or the Education Board is on the stakeholder, and everybody is agreed, like one is ready to give the funds, BMRCL, DDPI is willing to restore the school. The staff is actually initiating that entire project. So there, the MLA has also supported this project. Now they cannot release funds from their, MLA fund category and all, because they come with certain restrictions where they're not supposed to spend on educational institutional buildings and so on. But they're supporting that project, which is good enough for us. Rest we are trying to manage and so on. So these are the experiences that we have had across a few educational institutions.
Okay, thank you, sir. Pravani, what kind of hurdle or that experience you faced in convincing those, like your idea to those people? Like, it was again that government as well as the private
Yes,
organization. Yeah.
so I think honestly, I was extremely stuck upon this building that I wanted to document it, and it was like a blind spot. I had to approach them. I did not have any other option. Even though I tried to sneak around and tried to, get onto terraces of other buildings and click some photographs, the entire site was covered with trees. So initially, when I just made like a rough proposal and made a presentation, found articles and put all that together, when I approached the Cherlapalli Mint, basically most of the officers were reluctant. But I think it's because the chief general manager, CGM sir, um, had always been a teacher, and he used to teach at the ordnance factory. So because he was an academician, he understood the importance of a project like this. He understood the importance of something like this. And he felt that giving me an opportunity would probably help not just me, but that old structure that was lying there as well. And also, actually, during the same time, they had a proposal of of demolishing the mint building and probably building a high rise structure with a commercial complex on the bottom and a residential on top. So this was a proposal that was going on, and he wanted to stick to the sustainable one. He did not want this entire, history to just get erased in a minute. And I think it was only because he was, very positive about it that we could even try convincing the central government. And during, I think, one of Nirmala Sitaraman ma'am's speeches, she had also mentioned that the Kolkata Old Mint and the Saifabad Mint would probably house museums, and they would also convert a few buildings in Noida and Mumbai into museums, probably authoritated by the RBI. And we also took that opportunity to request them to, allow this building to house the museum. And post documentation, it was extremely difficult for me to even use any of the images and the information for my own purpose, and incorporate all of that into my work as well, because information like this is highly confidential. So I didn't I it was extremely difficult for me to make a decision, because I didn't know what I could use and what I could not, and all of that. But while after the museum got sanctioned, it took them almost 8 months to just clear out all the material that is already existing in just 2 sections, and we're talking about almost 16 or 18 sections. So I think, as sir already said, projects like these will take a lot of time. It'll because I mean the process will take a lot of time because they're slow, and I think with government, being patient is the only superpower that we can have.
Thank you, Pravani. One more question I have, and then I will open it for the public questions. Sir, Kiran sir, like taking India as an example, as a developing country, we know like our population, 40% population is below poverty line, and how much budget we get is less than 1% in the cultural department. So what is the best way or best method for as a developing country to generate or to get money or get financial assistance in these kind of projects?
Good question. Money is always a good question, and there is no straight answer to it. Right? See, let's rewind a little bit, because this question needs to be contextualized in the history of how we have worked, right? So most of the heritage or cultural domain, if you like, resided with the patrons. And who were these patrons? They were the kings. Probably all the works that you've shown about are either the patrons were kings, or then the later part, which is either the church or the large institution, the philanthropist organizations. So that they created what we now know as monumental heritage, so which is what we can see and feel and understand, and we strive to conserve, because we think that is the kind of big heritage which is there, of course, because that's for everyone to see. But there is also the vernacular, the folklorish, the other heritage, which does not require patronage at all. It never had patronage. What it had was the patronage of temples, for example. So all our festivals were rooted, all our cultural performances were rooted in temple as a premise, right? Now, with the colonial legacy, what has happened is that the government said, we don't want, the British administrator, I won't say government, the British administrator said, we don't want to connect with any of your cultural problems or anything. We are here to loot you. We're here to exploit you. We'll go do this and we'll go away. So they had a policy, what is called religious non-interference into the religious matters. But later they realized, over a few decades, that the largest repositories of wealth were temples. And therefore they created a central legislation, and that is what governs many of our richest temples now. It's a state temple. So they systematically how would I put this, obstructed patronage relationships, which means the money was now going to the government and not to the people who are actually using that. Now we have a very strong colonial hangover thanks to Congress or whatever you want to call it. We branded ourselves as secular. Now, once you say you're secular, you cannot give money to a certain religion or other religion. Doesn't matter which religion. Who will patronize it now? So there's no patronage. Now, if you want to, so for example, Mysore Palace, or you take any of the Rajasthan palaces, who's patronizing them? If it's their inheritance, then they will do it. If it's a government property, nobody's looking after it because it's an orphan. It's been orphaned by the government. Now, why would government give funds to something that's orphaned unless there is a champion like who's really interested in mints? So lots of work that we do in India is whims and fancies of a certain person who is in power. Look at the classic example that we are looking at in the current government now. All sorts of things that you never realized would be part of cultural heritage are now suddenly being a part of heritage and completely whitewashed, right? So you need someone in the government to patronize. If they are willing to patronize, then 1,200 crores for a statue doesn't mean anything. You can have 1,200 crores. You can redig the whole parliament building for whatever numbers of zeros that you can add to the value. I don't understand the value at all. But in the process, you are completely erasing heritage. The point I'm coming to is heritage has always been the prerogative of patronage.
Yep.
So if there is a trust which is patronizing you, you have a good chance. Public cannot fund their own heritage conservation. It's impossible because that is the last thing on their priority. Right?
Is the global scenario or it's only like
Global scenario everywhere. I mean, if you think that the cathedrals and the churches in Europe are really pretty good, no, they are struggling. They're struggling not in the financial sense because they're building fabrics and everything is intact, but they're struggling in the sense of bringing people to run those institutions. So they have a reverse problem. So they do not have any heritage managers who can really look after that because they cannot use that heritage. So money is better contextualized as patronage, right? So if you've got patrons who can work with it, so now for example you'll see lots of these activities that we do in either it's funded by the Aga Khan Trust or it is funded by probably the Tata Trust because they are the philanthropists, because some of the people sitting in those places have realized that you really need to look after heritage in some or the other way, particularly in places like Mumbai, which has got a very strong Parsi heritage or very strong industrial heritage. So you have to tap into people who you think can patronize this. You go door to door, bhiksha milega, kuch nahi milega. No pennies will be collected for any cultural heritage thing. What you'll get is, we have Ganpati festival, 10 days, everybody will have fun. We have Garba for 9 days, everybody will have fun. That's cultural heritage. That's perfectly fine. Ask them by donation for building, nobody will give you. Because that's not our model of patronizing. So we have to rely on governments. And governments means whims and fancies of people in power. Government doesn't mean bureaucrats. Because that poor bureaucrat, even if he's interested in a project, even if he's survived in that whole institution for all his life, cannot do anything without the signature of one person on top of it. And that person sometimes likes Amravati, sometimes he doesn't like Amravati. So, that's the kind of thing we are working with.
Yeah. Okay. Sir, Pankaj sir, would you like to share your view on this? Like as a developing country, what we can do or how we get money for these? You are muted, sir. Like we are not able to hear
Pankaj,
you.
you're muted.
Yeah, this is a big challenge. I mean, as in tech, where we have been working, it's just not restoration projects, but even smaller awareness campaigns and these things. This challenge is there. So presently the philanthropists are there, or the CSR funds is there. But one positive thing which is available, I mean, there are a lot of government schemes which they come out with. And if we can align with the objectives for which those schemes are, then there are some works that can be taken up under that. So today, I think with greater awareness, there is a lot of focus on heritage, involving or making multidisciplinary teams in projects. So identification of projects itself by the local governments, which can then try to get for central funds. This has become some kind of approach in the present time. So, but again, yes, it involves that the local stakeholders or the local governance bodies actually work on developing good project. It cannot be, as Kiran is rightly saying, whims and fancies. It cannot be one minister saying that, oh, I love doing this project. Sometimes it's good that those projects don't happen. Many times it's good that they don't happen and it just remains like on paper, because it can be sometimes disastrous. The way they're thinking is they just look for projects. You take some interesting projects to the ministers. At the end of the day, it is like, okay, this guy's project is 100 crores, and compared to that, there's a 5 crore project. Of course, it's a 100 crore project which they want to approve. It's not really the value additions which are done. But finally, I think though a lot of decision making is still with them, but there are opportunities with schemes and corporate responsible programs. Recently, Sonata has also given money to some projects. Of course, it has to align with the objectives and so on.
Okay. Seeing the limitation of time, I would like to call anyone is having any question, they can come up with their question.
Yeah, Nishant, I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
So Kiran, Pankaj, and Pravani, thanks for those really amazing presentations, and it's a really important topic, right? And I really liked how they were very different scales, all three, and talks about the same thing, of course, but in different ways. And I think the patronage issue is it's always been there. Right? There has to be someone that's interested, and then that's when things happen. My question primarily was about I don't know if I'm opening a Pandora's box here, but tourism becomes one thing which Kiran's been working with also for a lot. A lot of your academic work is aligned with that, and Pankaj would know it also, and Pravani also, I guess. I don't know if the minister was when they talk about museums, whether there was that angle at all. Is there some kind of do you see some kind of symbiosis, or from the perspective of tourism, it might be a cynical way to look at it, but heritage and tourism do get linked a lot together, right? And what are your takes on it? And
I
the
would
second,
just like to add something to what Salila is talking about. You talked about Pune Binale. Cochin Binale has actually helped the fort to kind of develop because of the tourism prospect of Cochin Binale. They managed to put it on the world map, so to speak. So
And my second question was about communities. This is something I was interested, because obviously in Pankaj's and Kiran's projects, the cities residents are very involved in what's happening, right? And Pravani, you can shed light on it if that angle also was that came into your project when it actually got implemented. But do you see a greater interest, because you've been working in this field for a long time? Do you see some change in how people perceive this whole idea of pride in their local cultural and built environment and heritage? So these are my two questions.
one more addition to what Salila is talking about. Bangalore wanted to do something like Binale about 10 years back. There was a Bangalore Art Festival. It never took off. They did it for 1 year and it kind of collapsed. Cochin seems to have been able to do it. Pune seems to have been able to do it. Would the governance model of those two places, both the people in politics and the municipality, the bureaucrats, have they been able to contribute into making these large scale ventures successful year on year?
Now, three very difficult questions. No easy answers to that. I just gave a talk in the afternoon on heritage tourism. And I think one of the key messages that I keep telling people is our discourse of heritage, particularly the government, is the ASI discourse, and which is Archaeological Survey of India, because most of our heritage is almost caged, and that is not what where the government should be putting money, because it's caged. You can't do much there. In fact, most of the heritage tourism that we talk about, at least 70 to 80%, is actually our living heritage. So you go to places like temple towns, you go to places which are lively, which are bustling. In terms of spectatorship, the museumized version of heritage, our contribution to the tourism economy is nil. This data tells us less than 2% of our domestic tourists go to any of the ASI sites. This is based on the ticketed entries that we've seen. In terms of overall volume, 2%. Compare that to the foreign visitors who are interested in our culture and therefore history and archaeology and all of that. We've got that percentage to the tune of about 30-35%. So 35% of foreign visitors would at least go and see some of the ASI sites. Right? Now that tells you that our governmental discourse of heritage is flawed. They've been focusing a lot on, but again, that's simply because, go back to the colonial legacy. The definition of heritage is coined through the lens of archaeology. And the cultural heritage, the living heritage, is given away because the government doesn't want to work with it, because of all sorts of political ramifications of those things. Huh? You support one festival, the other group will come and say, support our festival, and then support our festival. So they've been not doing it. They've been culturally appropriating some of these festivals. For example, the Kite Festival or the Karnetar Festival. So some of they are promoted as cultural properties. But again, people have been doing that for ages. They've been selling camels and donkeys in those festivals. What's so great about it? But now the government wants to position that as a tourism property for someone else, the exotic other, right? Now that would have a limitation, because who gives the government the right of whose heritage? I mean, that was the first thing that Pankaj mentioned. The key question with heritage is whose heritage, and who gives the right to the government to promote one set of heritage over the other set of heritage, right? And that's the very difficult balance. In fact, in the current regime, we are seeing that balance completely tipped off. We are seeing erasing of layers of heritage. Look at Jallianwala Bagh. It's a blot on Indian history, because they've just completely put murals under the name of heritage tourism. They've completely killed the ethos of that place as heritage. It's a place of trauma. It's a place of memory. It's a place where people have to feel something. And they've completely just come in and put it a whole pretty blanket mural, which could be in your Forum Mall. It could be near Gopalan Arcade, wherever it could be, and people will just pass by and not notice anything. But when you saw that bullet mark in that wall, it reminded you of generations of pain. That's the true heritage. Huh? There's no need to whitewash it, but we are doing it. So coming back to the question of heritage tourism, what is happening currently in the country, and I will urge all your RV students to look at heritage from a critical angle, not from a populist angle. Just because for tourism you want to do it. If you do it for tourism, you are actually what we call stage. It's a staged authenticity. So be cautious about that. The second question was about, yes, of course, the Kochi Biennale in Pune. Kochi Biennale generated money and all of that. That was great because it's government support. For Pune Biennale, we were very clear from beginning that this is our way of activating public space. So it was a regional way of working. Of course, we became very international. By 2017, we had something like 6-7 countries, artists come and stay with us and do all the work. But we had nil government support. In contribution terms, I remember talking to Bose and Rias and all of the team at Kochi Biennale. We worked. We were learning from them. They were coming. In fact, Bose gave a talk at Pune Biennale. So we knew what was happening. Kerala government didn't give them the last bits of money that they were promised. In fact, if you look at, and this is why critical angle is important, look at the post-Biennale reports, you will find that the Kochi fort workers were not paid for 6 months for transporting all that art, and they actually had to go in on a strike. So if you go and talk to local people, ordinary people, they said, "How kuch artwork hai, but it doesn't bother me." So who made money? It's the tourism industry which made money, which is the hotels, the booking portals, and the friends and families of the artists who were there, because they sold art. In our case, we didn't sell art. We were very clear that this Biennale is about bringing people together. It is bringing local culture together. It is not to showcase in the sense of, this is the great art. That was not the whole idea. The idea was to actually bring art out of the gallery and bring it on the streets. So that was the fundamental differences that we had. And everybody has, I mean, the world has about 180 biennales now. And that's perfectly fine. So those were the two questions. I forgot the third one, sorry.
Those were my two questions. I think it was about community. Do you see a greater involvement?
Yeah, of the sense of pride in the community.
Yeah, and is that bringing more people into the field?
Yes.
Yeah.
For example, our Chanda projects were really community engagement projects. So community took pride in that. So for example, if you go now, the people who say, "Acha, wo kone wala yellow wala ghar na, do mera ghar hai."
Mm-hmm.
So they start taking ownership of that part of the work. Now, if you ask them to do it themselves, probably they will never do it because they don't have resources. So that's where we come in as facilitators. It's not my money anyways. It is my sponsors' money that comes into play. And the sponsors have been working in those terms for other areas. For example, education. They've been running some Mahila Bachat Guts, small things. So we work with those NGOs.
Mm.
But we do what we are pretty good at, which is urbanism, right? We understand some of these concepts. So as this is something that we've also realized. And part of our little bit of challenges we had in Pune Biennale was we were not artists. Kochi is different. Kochi is run by artists. This was run by architects and urban designers who are straightforward. I mean, they're thinkers. We are not artists. And that was a big difference.
Mm.
But with the same token, we realize we don't want to be artists in these communities. We want to be facilitators of change. So therefore, the community was coming up to us onto that part of it. So it was not an art which was kind of installed onto them.
Right.
So we were facilitating that.
Thanks, Kiran. Pankaj?
I'll address both the questions, and the first one, Anuradha ma'am also, which she talked about. Many urban projects, whether you're talking of Biennale or any Lit Fest or anything, I think it needs a support of all stakeholders. We can't do away with the role of government and only the organizations, NGOs run, because somewhere they all have to be, I mean, there can be a sustained effort by one organization, but somewhere there will have to be support from everybody for it to become successful. Talking about communities, whether the projects benefited later, difficult to measure. Of course, there's been more interest in heritage today across many people. There's been a lot written about in newspapers, a lot being talked about. So they are sensitive when we start, announcing heritage walks and workshops. We find a lot of interest in people who come forth for these things. How that translates into protection is again a question mark. Because it's fine to always say, okay, I have an interest in heritage, but when you become an owner of a property, are you going to preserve that? It's a big question today. So there has been some examples when we've been able to showcase some kind of commercial successes of adaptive reuse and all. People have taken up that approach, but at the base of it, they were already sensitive to retaining their properties. It's only the approach that they adopted. On other hand, what we are finding interesting today is many of them wanting to adopt these kind of old materials, techniques, craftsmanship in contemporary buildings. So that kind of an inquiry is something that we are getting. So it's just not about preserving building, but preserving craftsmanship, preserving techniques of doing things. that if it gets if there are opportunities like architects like us who are practicing doing contemporary architecture can create, I think that will be a bigger contribution to conservation, and that we are seeing happening now.
So it kind of does it translate into more jobs for the workmen, or because I know some friends who are
Absolutely.
interested in lime mortar, right, and working
Yeah.
with natural materials and in
Yeah.
building
I
new
mean, we are
buildings
finding
also. In
this.
fact, so
We are finding new buildings. I mean, things like Big Brewski, where a complete, walls were done with lime mortar,
hmm.
Supercoach has worked, and so on. So when I think we understand the importance of those materials and the beauty of working with it, I think we can adopt them. So it's like, I think as architects, we are just not looking at designs and spaces, but what techniques, what materials, structures. I mean, complete package has to be thought of.
Thanks, Pankaj. Pravani, would you like to add to that?
Mm, So, ma'am, regarding the community question that you had,
Hmm.
since the secretariat was actually demolished during the same time, and it was also a building built by the Nizam, I think the people of Hyderabad were quite surprised and in a very positive way that this building that was abandoned for so many years and nobody even looked at it was finally being rejuvenated and now put to use as a public building. And also, I think in the future, when nobody will know how coins or currency was made, when we'll all be going back to that place to see how something that will be probably completely erased will be a part of our history and will be displayed, and we can actually go back to it. I think the people associated to this process and this mint and all of them will, we're not erasing their history as well.
Hmm.
So the people who actually came back to the mint, the ones who worked there for a lot of years, we'll not be erasing their history. So the ones that came back were, I think, very happy to see that it's finally not being demolished or erased and is being converted into a museum. And also because the site is in the heart of the city, and I think for a radius of 1 kilometer, there's no high-rise building.
Hmm.
If at all this proposal did not come up and they converted it into a high rise, I mean, they demolished it and built a high rise over there. I'm not sure if the people living around would actually be pleased by that, or they'd be happy with the amount of water consumption that would be going around there, or they're happy with inviting more people who are interested in going to a mint museum.
Thanks, Pravani.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other question?
I think. Oh, if we are, I think we're close to our time.
Yeah.
I think there's one student who has a question.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am. This is Rohan Chaturvedi. Uh, and I had a question. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, we can hear you, Rohan.
Yeah.
Oh, somehow he has left the meeting.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
good now.
Hello, Kiran sir. So I'm 25th batch of Bharati Vidyapit, and I also had Pune Binala experience, which was great. Thank you. Thank you for that, and great to see you again. And I completed my urban design from RV recently. So, in my thesis, so I want to ask some very different questions. So, when I did my thesis in RV, I faced some issues. Like I did thesis on Python, which is in Maharashtra. So I got to know that many research was done on Python, but due to it's not recorded or online or even offline in colleges and all, I couldn't reach to those research. So what is happening, what I felt is, in India, even we can see the history that many things are not recorded or which is not been provided or we don't have access to those things. So due to that, we are starting research from zero, and it is taking our time. We are not actually reaching the next level. So that's what I felt. And I think when in urban design, so we see in architecture, we had research subject in fourth year, and then we had some time for our thesis, and we could actually manage doing our thesis properly. But in urban design, we just have 2 years for doing urban design, and our thesis topic just goes for some 3 to 4 months. So I feel that maybe our thesis topics, we should take it bit earlier semester, and maybe we can get a chance on thinking on it. And then we should also have some different platforms where we will share all these things. So what can be done to actually newcomers to get old research and all? Because if we are saying that my batch was 2028 batch, so our thesis, we were 18 people, and 9 people were focusing on cultural heritage, and we all faced the same issue. So
Prasanna
what
was
can
still
be
there
done?
in the meeting.
Okay, I think this is an internal question for Salila and team. I would probably refrain from saying anything at
I'm
this
not
point.
part of that, Kiran. So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
uh, so
but we
it's
can
We'll
more
have
of
this
a curricular
conversation.
thing. Is that what you're saying?
No, no, we can have more detailed conversations in another session. But
Yeah.
probably, as I said, it's internal matter for you.
Yes.
But there is a broader issue of cultural heritage documentation and publications about it, and this is one of the things, Salila, I think we will be talking in the forthcoming weeks.
So, Prerna, if you're in Bangalore, Kiran is visiting RBCA on 6th October. And
Oh,
Pankaj, you're more than welcome as well if you're in town. And
Yeah, would love to meet Kiran.
yeah, so
Yes,
please do
Kiran,
come.
looking
We're
forward.
planning to, yeah, so we could have a longer conversation on these issues. Yeah,
And we can talk to Prasanna also about this
yeah,
idea of having that thesis topic little earlier.
yeah.
No, let me acknowledge, Prerna, this is a very significant question. There is no doubt about it, and I think that significance comes from number of areas. One is the lack of research in general at the level of design, and also the fundamental challenges of dealing with a design discipline versus a research discipline, and how do you integrate that after 5-6 years of hardcore architectural documentation work that you do, how do you transcend from there to the research thing? So this is something that will speak to in another session, another forum. But it's a genuine problem. In fact, I've been doing that since morning today. The second is we take cultural heritage for granted. That's a bigger kind of discourse level problem, that we fail to document the nuances of it. And I think this is a part of the design education or design thinking, where we are focused only on one aspect that really interests us, and in the process of focusing or narrowing it, we lose the larger sense of why this is important as a project. And I think, Pravani, you've demonstrated excellently well how that one idea, one focus can be broadened up to unpack so many layers that we talk about. So I think, but it is time consuming. So Prerna, there's no short answer to it. It is time consuming. Probably as a matter of syllabus thinking, it's up to Salila and your team. Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, sir. Actually, I'm sorry, I got disconnected. This is Rohan.
You ask question, you will be thrown out. This is a government mechanism. No, please go ahead and ask, Rohan.
Sir, my question is about the patronage and ownership that we talked about today. One is the obvious that ownership comes from relation, and relation comes from the if you have a local tradition, so there comes this entire idea of my culture, my identity. So that ownership can be devised, and but uh okay, so I even I my question is, as a student, like if I am interested and intrigued by the public spaces of Bangalore, let's say, so how does this patronage and ownership for me will arrive? So because who will take this responsibility of public spaces? I remember Pankaj sir walking us through Kavan Park last to last semester, where he talked about the culture, fabric of time that Kavan Park has evolved from. But then, how do we as individuals take ownership of public spaces? Because it is a public space after all.
Okay, that's a very long question. I'll give you a short answer. There is no space in this country which is public space. It's a false notion. Unfortunately, because I don't have a word, I use the term public space. It is owned by the government. Even if it's not owned by the government, it is managed by the government. So they have the regulatory mechanisms. So tomorrow you think you want to go and dance in that public space, the policeman will come and charge you with a obscenity clause. Right? So you'll say this is
I think he got disconnected.
municipality, or it's a state government, or it's a federal government. So जो आपका नहीं है वो किसी और का है. So there is nothing inherent public. They're giving us for using that space. How you use it, there are regulations about it. Okay. So if you want to rally around public space, you have to think about public cause. Because see, think about it this way. Tomorrow, if you get married and you say, I want to get married in Kavan Park. Okay, fantastic, great idea. But after you've done this, 100 other people say, we also want to get married in Kavan Park. What will the government do? So there are inherent restrictions, or these are called assumed knowledges, that no space or no place is inherently public. Somebody owns it. Okay? Now, वो कहाँ से किससे लेके आना, that is a separate story.
All right.
Okay.
Any other question, or Salila ma'am? I have one or
You have a
Sorry?
question?
Yeah, I have like many questions, but just one or two I can go for.
My takeaways from these conversations is that I need an evangelist, somebody who's willing to pitch for an idea. I need an idea of a sponsorship, and I definitely need local participation to keep the whole story alive and running and kicking. Thank you for a wonderful session. It was a nice learning experience for me. Thanks.
I will take one question from Kiran sir and Pankaj sir, and then one with Pravani. So extension of that, what Rohan has asked, that idea of a public space. When you put any public space for space improvement or regeneration, okay, so whose emotion or whose memory we should respect? Like there are multiple articles I have read about this Central Vista project. Okay. So few things, when I was there for my bachelor's and master's, I have experienced that whole Chauraha, that India Gate. Indeed, it needs public infrastructure development. There is no question that. But there are many questions which is coming, like I had that memory with so many activities which I was doing as a child, and then I have grown up, and everything has been changed now. So if it is public space and we are putting it for regeneration, so whose emotions should be respected? Do we go for infrastructure development, beautification? Yes, that is, again, if you go for anything which is good for, like, we are making everything for the next generation. We are improving it. If
एक मिनट, नहीं, अगर वैसा होता तो मोदी जी would not be constructing the Parliament House. He would not be constructing Sardar Patel statue. It is self-glorification of a person. I'm sorry, I'm being absolutely straightforward here. Because there is no public consultation in this whole process. You're saying this is for public. Where is public consultation? There's no consultation.
Okay.
How can it be public then? You are doing an administrative requirement. It's like this. My house is getting bigger. I am making more money. I need 2 more rooms. Full stop.
Yeah.
And I will decide how those 2 rooms will be brought. I will not go to you and ask, If I was really concerned about public space, I will go and ask my neighbors, see, this is what's going to happen. Can we look at it in a different manner?
Okay. So any public or any regeneration, we have to go for public
Absolutely.
involvement and that.
If you say it's like this, it's a false notion, and I'm very clear about this one. He said, I am doing it for my next generation. No, you are reaping the benefit right now. You're buying a Mercedes for whom? Next generation. अरे वो पैदा नहीं हुआ अभी तक.
Okay.
Don't, see, unfortunately, we've been fooled for long.
No, any public square, if I see in the foreign country, there's a public infrastructure is really amazing. So that how that will happen in India? That is my question. Like
It will not happen.
That will not happen,
It
and
will
that
not
is not
happen.
Okay.
Fundamentally, there is a structural difference in the societies. There's a structural difference. You ask for public participation there, people will come with ideas to say this is how we want to change our lives, right? That consultation will go on for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 years, till the time they come to a consensus. And if they don't come to a consensus, they'll say we don't need this project.
Okay.
But in India, first, your public participation is very limited. It's participation or decisions of your elected representatives. We are not bothered. We want our MLA or MP to fight for us. We are not willing to fight.
Yeah, we vote one time and then we think they will do everything for us.
Correct. And therefore he says, you vote me once a year. You don't want to see me. Why should I see you? And therefore I will do, you've given me the mandate. I'll do what I want. So, for example, I'll just give you one example. Our Arts Plaza that all we take glorify. After a year, somebody said, I want to put name, and this is called Kaiwari Bapaji Dhote Walking Plaza. I mean, what nonsense. This is the corporator's father's grandfather's who has nothing to do with this art plaza or heritage of this city. You understand where that frustration comes in when you talk of public space. I think we aspire for a lot of things, not recognizing that structurally we are a different society. And we need to understand our heritage through that lens. So first you need to educate your elected representatives. You need to educate our own system. Anyways, I can go on about it, but because you said public spaces, where will public participation come? It will never come in the way we are talking. And when we want to get people involved, like Pankaj or like other people who have been working in the field or like myself, because we voice our opinions, governments don't like us. Because we will run counter to, we will try and hold them accountable to the public space. Otherwise, what happens in public space? वो minister का लड़के का भतीजे का शादी हो जाता है. The procession goes on. Correct, no?
Yes, sir. Okay. One last question with Pravani. You said like you have decided to demolish certain walls in that
Yes, sir.
area. So how it happened? Like it was your decision because of the structure, or it was your decision with your program? Like with your program, you have to fit the area, and then you decided to demolish, or it was structurally not fit, and then you decided to demolish those?
So I think it was both. The main block, which was obviously made of stone, when I showed you the zoning layout, a part of the structure was not really stable, and there were a lot of branches that were cutting through the walls and all of that. So those, so I did go to a few conservation architects, and I did have a conversation with them. And probably I did not have the time and the instruments to actually go to site and review, if on a very practical level, see if that wall can stand for another 50 odd years or not. But then
real assessment on site you have not.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So based on the photo documentation and what I've seen and what I could understand, I had to come up with the decision. Also because I'll have to deal with some intervention according to the university and have like some program value and area and all of that. I did have to demolish a few more spaces. So it was to do with the program requirement and the structure as well.
Thank you.
So
Thank you,
I'm not
everyone.
sure
Yeah.
if actually on site now in the future the government will have to demolish a few, or they might work even harder on restoring the walls that have like deep cracks and all of that.
So I think in the interest of time, Nishant, we will
Yes.
close now.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It
It's
will go on.
weekend evening. So
Yeah.
yeah. Anushka, I invite you to do the honors.
Thank you so much to the amazing speakers for giving us so much interesting insight and sharing your thoughts about heritage and conservation. We would also like to thank our principal, Dr. O.P. Bhavne, for facilitating us with opportunities to have such interacting and engaging webinars. And would also like to thank our faculty advisors for Crossroads of Conversations, Anuradha ma'am, Salila ma'am, and Shweta ma'am. Also, thank you to all the audience members for joining in and asking questions and making this more interactive and fun to be part of. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kiran, Pankaj,
Thank you.
Pravani,
Thank you,
and
sir.
Nishant.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So
Thank you
much,
so
everyone,
much.
and thank you,
Look forward to meeting you,
Anushka and
Kiran.
Ashwin
Thank you.
also. Thanks
Sure.
a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Okay. Have a
Take care.
good night and weekend. See you all. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.